There we go. That should be working now. Thanks for the heads up. Yeah, I literally checked it, and then just by rotating the microphone from one spot, one position to the other, it disconnected it. So had to unplug it and plug it back in again. Anyway, hi everybody. Welcome to Rocket Lasso, episode 19, the second to last episode of the season. I was going to end the season with this one. I was like, we'll squeeze it in, squeeze one more in, get a nice round 20 episodes for this shortened season. I mentioned it last week, or actually 2 weeks ago. I've just got a lot going on in these couple months, planning various trips and getting half res out the door, so that eats up a lot of time. So I'm going to do the typical break, and then we'll be back with season 2 a little bit later. Don't know exactly when. It's when things settle down, but it'll definitely be coming back. So that's the idea. And while we're just doing the opening announcements, hopefully everybody got to catch all of the R21 stuff last week. So I had my video with the overview of R21, and then I got to do a live stream from the hotel at SIGGRAPH in LA, where Rick joined me, which is really fun. I've been wanting to have him on the show for a while. Unfortunately, I had to have like my travel microphone that can pick up 2 people, so that was a little clunkier than just having this good mic. But in any case, I think it worked pretty well. We got to talk about it, and the really spotty hotel internet worked incredibly well. If you're in Chicago, there's a meetup tonight, if you didn't already know. And what else do we got? Half-res tickets. Half-res tickets are still on sale. Go ahead, and if you haven't signed up, or if you've been looking to have a trip to Chicago, now is a good time to do it. We've got half-res happening September 18th. You can just head over to halfres.com and get yourself a ticket and a T-shirt and all that good stuff. What else do I have? Yeah, I think that pretty much covers everything I want to do news-wise. Let's see, who do we got in the chat? We got Sean, Viking, what's going on? Or VFX King. Mr. Matt Dog, Monthys, Luminetrix. Felix, what's going on? Level, Eric, hello. Tobias, lots of regulars. Alan, hello. Jan. Ooh, something in another language I can't quite read. Greg, hello. NLK, what's happening? Scotty. Paul, Yadaglo. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming and hanging out. Cinemazuka. That's a cool name. There's a nice flow to that screen name, Cinemazuka. Dennis, Marco. Anyway, thanks for coming and hanging out. And if you happen to be here, I had to reset, if you remember, 2 weeks ago. I was having all this trouble with the live stream, or rather XSplit, the streaming software, and it turned out that there's something wrong with the way I specifically set it up, so I had to kind of delete all of my presets and rebuild everything. I haven't gotten to rebuild everything quite yet, so I don't have the animation on the holding screen, and I don't have my nice little animated GIFs for the big supporters on Patreon. So I just want to do an early shout out for BurstFX for supporting, and we've got Mike, and of course, the Great Wanderer Studios. Thank you so much for supporting the live show and me on Patreon. It's really, really helpful, and it allows me to do more of this. In any case, I think we are good with all the opening announcements. Get some links together. We've got R21 open. I really don't have much in the way of plugins installed. In fact, they just had a new tiny point release, which broke all the plugins, I think. So, but we'll be able to jump back and forth between R20 and R21, depending on what the question is. But if you have any specific R21 questions, then we're totally open to try and tackle some of those. Get the links together. Of course, I need to see the artist who created it. If you're giving me a link, artist or studio, and that should cover it. Let's do it this proper. As you can see, we already got a couple of questions coming in. Feel free to post them. Don't spam, but feel free to repost if I don't see it. And somebody saying, where's the Slack link? If you don't already know, you can go to rocketlassoslack.com and sign up for the Slack channel. The real website is making progress, so hopefully that'll be out not too long from now. And then that'll all be tied in directly on the official rocketlasso.com. But I'm going to switch over to the other screen and begin the proper real intro, and we will get going. So feel free to post any question links, or just type out a question if it's not a specific link. I love the typed out questions as a little bit of variation. In any case, let's get this going. And I'm going to switch to the holding screen. I'll be right back. everyone. Welcome to episode 19 of season 1 of Rocket Lasso. Very exciting. It's the second last episode for this season, but we will be back, a month or two, not possibly 3 from now, not too long. Time goes really quick, believe me, considering we've already done almost 20 episodes of this show since I started my company, Rocket Lasso. In any case, we've got some R20, we've got some R21, if any questions happen to kind of fall into that category. But let's jump on over to our screen here and jump into the chat, where we've already got a bunch of people hanging out, asking questions, and we are ready to go. Hello for all the new people. I definitely see some new names today, so thanks for hanging out. So we've got a link, but we also have a typed out question. So I'm going to read the first question, then we'll jump back. Zach, how would you rig a cylinder to walk end over end like a slinky? Ooh, that's an interesting question. And then, let's see, we've also got Bosnian asking, you got stuck on this project. How to make a splash from a can of deodorant like this? Oh, that sounds challenging as well. I like both these questions. Well, let's see what we got here in this question. I'm jumping this over. So we got like a little spritz. And what are you specifically saying? You say splash, but I guess you mean kind of this spritz. Oh man, that is no trivial feat. I mean, because okay, a couple things. Let's just analyze what we're looking at here for a second. First of all, there's probably some sort of black light or something really bright. You can see it silhouetted really well. Depending on what you're doing, something that might be smart would be to do something like, you probably don't have access to this footage, but presumably this is a green screen spray effect. So this is something that they filmed. It's the kind of thing where it's like, you could just take this video, crop that out, and then put it on a flat card in 3D and put it outside the nozzle. And you're going to get something incredibly detailed that is going to render incredibly fast. So always remember that there's no need to do it fully in 3D if there's another way to do it. I used to struggle with that a lot, where I used to try and make everything for real in 3D, and then I don't remember when, but eventually I realized everything is already fake in 3D. So if you're already faking reality, then fake it everywhere you can if it's going to save you time and look better. So along those lines, if you're to take this, turn it grayscale, and just overlay it on top of a spray bottle with a flat plane here, that would look really good, and it would run really quick. Now, after that, it turns into two methods. Would be trying to essentially procedurally make this material, or make it as a material, almost in the same way where it's still kind of flat, make it as a material that's blasting forward, or do a full particle simulation. There's a lot of detail and things I could layer up on here. Like even this one's going in slow motion. You see all this extra craziness going. So that would be, I mean, the resolution isn't necessarily high enough here. The quality is incredibly low actually, but you can still see, look at all these tiny, tiny little individual particles and everything drifting around. Like the sheer, like this is millions of points if you want to get something kind of accurate looking for it. So it kind of turns into how you want to think about it. How, well, or I guess it turns into the specifics of like, how are you seeing it? What is it, its purpose and place in the project you're working on? Because honestly, I would, go and grab a sheet of paper or black paper or something, and then take your iPhone out and then film you spraying a bottle, and then chop it out, increase the contrast, make a mask, put it inside of Cinema, or get an alpha, put it in Cinema. That would work really well. That's honestly what I would suggest for this. Going and doing this particle wise, I mean, obviously our go-to would be running in trying to run this in X particles just for fun, just because I'm looking for any excuse to pop open R21. Let's do the most quick basic version of this using the new field forces and see if what it looks like. But I'm going to be making like 1,000 particles, not 1,000,000 particles. But let's just see what we can get. So here we are in R21. I really like the new interface, and it's just slightly darker than the other one. Here's 20, and then here's 21. Just a little darker, a little bit sharper. But let's make this relatively quickly. I'm going to create a regular Cinema 4D particle system. Let's go ahead and make this pretty tiny. I'm going to set down to 10 by 10. I think if we turn it into a cone, it'll spit them out in a round shape. I'm not entirely sure. We can set up or maybe that's just how it does this angle horizon, or horizontal. What am I talking about? Let's go ahead and set that up to 35 degrees. And now we should be getting a kind of a spit of particles flying out. It's a little big compared to the reference. Let's drop that down to 25. That seems a little better. Back to particle. Let's make at least 1,000 particles. So okay, a lot more particles. I'm not sure how many particles. Okay, I'm throwing 10,000 particles. It's not too bad. So it seemed to go quite quickly. So let's speed this up. I'm going to go up to about 555. Boom, big burst. And I think we just want a little spritz, so I'm going to say 10 frames worth of it. So let's go. Psst. So there we go. Quick little spray. Now, in addition to that, something that I found out that they did is they made it so we can animate the birth rate on these. So I'm actually kind of inclined to say, let's go ahead and make the emission take longer, and then we can keyframe the birth rate. And then, in fact, I'm going to scoot that over to about frame 8. And then at frame 10, I'm going to have those drop down to 0. So they're actually going to slowly transition to a smaller number. I haven't actually tested this out yet, but the idea would be that there's fewer particles on the back end of that. And to visually see it, I'm actually going to drag that way out. Let's just see if it actually seems to decrease the number of particles. Yeah, it totally seems to. Like as those go out, there's fewer particles there at the end. Now, I don't think we're going to see too much of the effect, but I just want to mention that you can actually, in R21, keyframe those, which is a pretty crazy specific detail. All right, so we've got this burst of particles coming out. They're all just flying forward, pretty straightforward. Important to note also that in R21, they apparently dramatically sped up the speed of the original emitter. But let's go ahead and go to simulate. Under forces, we now have a field force. And the field force is like all the other forces combined into something pretty crazy. So let's go ahead and I'm just going to start out by creating a random field. And let's go ahead and make a cross section of this so we can have it calculate quicker and it's a little easier to see. So X is facing us, so we have X, Y, Z. You can put X down to 0, and I can see we get this kind of flat grid. And what I've been doing is jumping this up to an appropriate scale. Let's do about 1,000. And yeah, it's actually, that might actually end up being a little too big, but let's go ahead and grab our field force. I'm going to scoot it off to the side so we can see our emitter. It's going to shoot off the particles, and yeah, this is a pretty good scale. Now, you can see that we're seeing our line density here, and you can see all these tiny little tick marks which are indicating a particular direction, which is all good. The important thing to note, let me twirl down this vector length, is I can increase this, and you can see all these lines. The scale of these lines is purely visual, and it's important to note that even though we're seeing this grid, every individual particle is doing its own calculation. It's not dependent on like this density or this resolution. That's not a variable here. So this is just a way of us seeing it. So I'm going to go ahead and lower the scale down to 1, and we can go back to our random field, and we can affect how this behaves here. So let's go to our Perlin noise here, which might be a good start. I'm going to put on a scale of 1,000, which is just making so you can see this, there's a little bit of more uniformity here. Now we have a couple big modes here inside of our field force, and it is, are we adding to the velocity like a turbulence, like a generic Cinema 4D turbulence? Are we going to set an absolute velocity, or do we want to change the direction? In this particular instance, I'm kind of feeling like let's add to the velocity, and I'm not sure, and you can see as I increase the strength, our lines are getting longer. So let's keep that in mind. But I jumped up to 55, and let's see how much we can visually see its effect. Clearly, it is definitely having an effect. You can see everything spreading out a little bit, so that's cool. In fact, it's spreading out pretty blatantly, so let's keep that in mind. Maybe our scale is a little bit too big. And right now, at this point, we're just tinkering. I'm going to talk about the principles when I can, but now it's smaller. You can see these are blowing through the air, and you can see them kind of clustering up a little bit. Now, honestly, that's pretty strong, but I want to crank up the strength even more, because we were kind of seeing it wisp through the air a little bit. So we've got, but of course that starts scattering it too much. So then we can start adding on additional fields here. So if I add on a solid, then the solid you can see, let's set that to normal. This is completely overriding, and currently it's a vector, so it's saying go up on Y. But I could say I want this to travel on Z, X, Y, Z, so we'll do 0, 0, 1, and now everything's traveling to the right. So if I just hit play, this is just speeding everything up forward. You can see it's boom, blasting forward. But now I can add, well, let's pull that to the bottom, and I'm going to add the randomness on top of it. And now you can see that we've added a bunch of randomness, but everything's still being forced to move forward as well. Now we have our strength here, which is, we get to drop this down to like 0.2, so it's not quite as stretched. So now it does still want to go forward, but it's not nearly as strong. We just got to find our balance here. So it's almost like right now we have a wind pointing to the right and an independent random variable. So that's working pretty well. I'm going to go to our random field and let's go ahead and give ourselves a decent amount of animation speed. I'll jump it up to 100. So that should be animated pretty quick. It does slow things down. And I think we want to slow everything down overall. So I will create a simulate forces friction. So we'll just create some friction in the overall scene, which should be slowing that down a little bit. Yeah, that actually worked. That's going a significant, taking a lot of the energy out of the scene, so everything becomes a little bit more consistent. And that is a variable. This friction is really important if we are doing add to velocity. But we could turn off the friction for a moment, and I could say, let's just change the direction. So now this is this initial speed bursting forward. And you know what? I'm going to change this field force. I'm going to go to our display mode. I'm going to change its display from line length to brightness, and I can see that they're always going to be the same size. So you can see it's changing direction, but they have to maintain the same speed. So you get all this crazy randomness of the way they're moving around. Or we could set it to set absolute velocity, and now everything's going to kind of flow around based on exactly what the power of this thing is. So if we speed it up, those will travel faster. So now we have to decide which of these is more of the behavior that we're going for. Now, I still think that we want to add to velocity. So I'm going to go ahead and put that back to 55. Let's go ahead and add the friction back in again, and let's see what we get. So that's working pretty well. I might want, with the friction, we can probably speed this up a little bit. So now we get that nice little amount of added motion. Everything's going forward, but let's go ahead and even add in some gravity here. And I could just make a second solid here, and I'm going to set it to add, and let's put a -1 on our direction. So now there's also a downward trend as well. So you can see it's going to burst forward and immediately take over and start having everything plunge downward. So let's go ahead and make that a lot weaker, 0.2. So now it should be able to take a little bit of time before it starts traveling down. I think our friction's a little strong. Let's drop that down to half the amount. Boom, nice little burst. Nice, that's working pretty well. And like it's all about just layering these things up. Now, if we wanted to, these aren't going to render unto themselves. So if we want them to render, we'd have to put some material on there or a sketch and tune. If I was really stylizing this, depending on the spray, we can go and I'm going to select the emitter and let's go to our MoGraph menu, create a tracer, and let's say from end, and I'm going to set that to something small, maybe like 5 frames, and we get these little trails coming off of it, which will give it a little more substance, and that's something we can render with hair, render with hair or sketch and tune. We wouldn't have to worry about the actual particles anymore. We just have that trail. And we can also shorten those up, just to, it gives it a little more volume, fills it up a little bit. And based on the way it's animating, it seems to be working pretty well. Let's see. I'm just checking the chat to make sure everything's working okay. Let's see. Philip is asking if these field forces work with dynamics, and the good news is they totally do. If I create a cube here, and let's add a simulation rigid body, and I hit play, you're going to see, boom, it's immediately moving off to the right. You can see it wiggling that little bit. Let's go back to our field force, and I'm going to turn off the solids, so now we just have our random motion. If I play, you can see, oh, I guess gravity's still turned on. Let's go to gravity, our dynamic gravity, controller command D, delete gravity. And now you're just seeing our field force pushing this around. But something that's even cooler is it even works with soft bodies. So if I turn this into a soft body, then now the individual points of this cube are getting moved around. But this, of course, looks cooler if we use a plane. So let's put that on a plane instead. So now we've got this soft body plane. I'm going to make it a lot flappier, I guess. Let's weaken all of this down. So it's very twisty, and you can see the individual little elements are being affected by the wind. So yeah, that totally goes and applies to all of that. Although I have found, I'm hoping that it gets changed, it doesn't work on soft bodies on the spline, and soft bodies on spline is one of my favorite things to do. So I'm hoping something happens to fix that up. Now, as long as we're here, tinkering with this, I've talked about it a little bit, but I just think it's so powerful I want to show it here. If I were to make something like let's do the helix one from scratch. If I make a helix spline, and I'm going to go ahead and give it a start radius and a bigger end radius, I'm going to give it a height of 0, so we get this big spiral. And let's go ahead and grab our field force. I'm going to 0 that out, hit pause so I can actually type in a number. So if I were to, we've got our random field force here, but I'm going to go into our field force. I'm going to drag in our helix. As soon as I drag in our helix, then we should see in our field force. Oh, wait, actually, as a child, it doesn't do anything. That's not how you do it. You drag it in directly. So now I've got this helix in here. It's set to normal, so it should override everything. In fact, if we turn off this random field, you can see that we've kind of got this twirl going around, but it's kind of fading out. You see it's really strong here on the end and weaker as it gets to the tip here. So what we have to do is grab our offset inside the helix. We'll grab our offset and crank it up all the way. Then you see we get this full spiral pattern. And to me, a spiral pattern is a lot more interesting than just a circular one. So based on just this spiral pattern, if I hit play, we're going to see our piece of cloth here just twirling around. And no matter how far away it gets, it's constantly going to be, it's finding wherever it is in space and finding the nearest spline point to it. And you can see it's getting pulled closer to that bit of the surface. So let's go ahead and pause and rewind, and now we can go into our helix. I'm going to say, you know what? I want the inverse direction. I'm going to play now, and now it's going to be twirling it the opposite direction and trying to travel from the center outward. Let's make this even more interesting. I'm going to add a new R21 mask to this helix, and I'm going to feed the helix again as the mask, but this time I'm going to set the helix not to distance mode along, so it's traveling along, but I'm going to set it to be based off the radius. So this is a mask, which is saying, look at this radius as a way of falling off how far this is pulling, and it's going to be traveling around there. So it's free everywhere else. And keep in mind, it's cutting off, these points are cutting off based on that grid we generated, but that's not actually the cutoff. It goes for, infinite distance. So now it's only being affected when it's inside of this little range. See, it's moving a little bit weird off to the side. So how do we control, let's say we wanted it to be stuck in the line a little bit more. Well, let's go ahead and drag the helix in a third time, and this time I'm going to set it directly to radius, and now you're going to see that, let's go ahead and turn that off. I just want to see this radius. You can see that it's actually aiming at the line. If you just do radius, it aims at the line instead of along the line. So by adding this along the line and aiming towards the line, then this should be constantly getting pulled, hopefully, towards the line. I guess we're adding to velocity. I'm going to set absolute velocity. Might demonstrate this a little bit more clearly. There we go. Okay, there we go. So by setting it to absolute velocity, it's both pulling it towards the line and along the line. So I had gone and made my couple things. First of all, our radius pulling it towards the center is very strong. So I'm going to go ahead and weaken that by going to either lower this opacity, but I kind of like doing it via lowering the max here. So let me make sure that's working. So I want it to pull towards the center, but not too strongly. There we go. So that's working a little bit better. And actually, just by doing that, it kind of fixed the problem I had where it's clumping up too much. But we could always go back into our cloth setting, and we can go into a soft body, and we could give it more shear, more flexion, and it's going to go and try and maintain its shape a little bit more. But as far as like art directing dynamics, look at this thing's ability to look at this control that we have. Like, how would we do this otherwise? How would you tell this to travel along the spline? It's getting caught back in the original, but now it should be free, and it's getting pulled based on that fall off all the way along it. If we want to, we can go back into this mask, and I'm going to just delete the mask. So now it's just going to be pulled along no matter what, but it's still being pulled nearer the spline, so it should maintain that shape a little bit better. So yeah, that's going to travel along. So look at this ability to art direct and change the direction that this cloth is traveling. And we've got our random field still, so let's go ahead and add that as well. So now we're traveling along. We've also got this randomness introduced. Currently the random field is animated a lot. Let's go and slow that down, increase it back up to 1000. So yeah, now we can see it's being pulled along, and we get this cool extra waviness influencing it. So look at this motion that we're getting out of this piece of cloth, like so quickly and in such a fun art directable way, like direct control over that thing. It's so cool. I'm going to go ahead and save this scene file, and we will move on to possibly doing that slinky question. I see that there's some other questions coming in, and actually we'll take a look at what other people are asking, if there's any other questions along these lines. Field forces. Greg, that is correct. R21 is not officially released yet. Typically, in the past, it comes out in early September. I can't say anything beyond that. Hi, everybody. Let's see. Different question. different question. I'm just seeing if there's any follow-up questions to what I'm specifically talking about here. Excellent. I do want to think about that slinky question, although I'm not necessarily super clear on how we're going to do it. It's not obvious in my head how we would do it. But somebody's saying, Chad L is saying, what's the best approach to make max variations possible out of 5 horses and 5 saddles? Max variations. I'm trying to think if there's any specific way of like iterating every possible combination, because it's pretty trivial to get any random combination of the two. And honestly, at that point, it's just like 2 different cloners, and then you randomize their seeds. But if you wanted exactly one of each, I don't even know if that's your question, if there'd be one of each. Let me, what's a good way of, I don't even know how to do it. Because I'm trying to think, you have 5 variations of something. And then, let's just say you have, whatever. Let's simplify it. We have 4 variations of something and 4 variations of something else. Or maybe one of the points is, let's do 2 and 4, because maybe you have different numbers. So let's see, what's the quickest way of making something? I guess we'll just make some cubes with some different colors. So let's go ahead and make 5 different cubes, and I'm just going to make them be different colors. So let's turn on their color, and we'll just make them pretty bright. So let's make a red, and we'll make a yellow, and we'll make a green, and we'll make a blue, and we'll make a pink. So we got 5 different cubes. I'm going to select them all. We're going to coordinates. I'm going to type in, what is it, num times 200. There we go. So there's our 5 cubes. And then I'm going to combine them with some cylinders. So we'll just make a taller cylinder so they intersect with each other. And we will make 2 cylinders. And those 2 cylinders will be white and black. So there are potentially 10 combinations here based on, just the math. We have 2 types of cylinder and then all of those. So if you just wanted to do random combinations, obviously this is not a horse, but if we could make a cylinder and we could lay these on top of each other, or put both cylinders into this cloner. Let's go to Object tab. We've already making a count off to the side. Let's say it's going to travel along Z every 250 units, and let's copy and paste the cloner, and I'm going to put all the cubes into this one. So what we'd want to do is we have oh no, the cloner is overriding the colors. Whoopsie. Oh, that sucks. I didn't think about that. I went and I colorized them using their color property, but as soon as you put them in the cloner overrides it. And I don't think there's any way to stop it from overriding it. It's just on. Yeah, there's nothing to change to stop that. Dang it. Dang it, dang it, dang it. Nothing to do except for do it. So I'm going to make some copies. Do I have, no, I don't. Oh, too bad. Okay, well, it'll just take a second. Same process. Deselect. Yellow. Deselect. Green. Deselect. Blue. Deselect. Purpley pink. And one more to be white. And one more to be black. All right. Let's go ahead and apply those. And white and black. Okay, so we just kind of by math know that we have, well, the total count that we're going to have here is going to be the 2 numbers multiplied by each other. So I can say, what do we got? 5 times 2, and that's going to be our exact count. So this should be every possible combination here by saying this. So there's only going to be one white one with a red, and we'll never see another white one with red. There's only one black one with yellow. So there we go. That has now introduced every possible combination, and they're each unique. So I guess maybe that is just straight up the way to do it. If you wanted to add, I don't want to say additional variation, but if you wanted this not uniform, or if you had more, I could just say, okay, here's 20 of them, and now it is going to repeat. Now the second set will be exactly the same as the first, but we grab both cloners and say, instead of iterating the clones, we'll just randomize the clones. So now we might end up with 2 greens next to each other and 2 blacks next to each other, but it's just going to be kind of an infinite amount of random combinations. I'm actually surprised, but you can see we look at, like, just by sheer random coincidence, we get a bunch of black and blues combined right in a row. But you have a different random seed, so you can tick through here and get those randomly organizing. But like I said, iterating is going to be the maximized number of variations based on that, just by feeding it into 2 different cloners. I'm trying to think if there's any additional thing in there. Let me see if you have any follow-up. Let's see. Okay, I'm gonna save this and let's go and maybe address that slinky question. But I'm a little. Let's see. Combinations. The trick with the slinky kind of idea is it's really easy to rig from one direction to the other, but then how do you flip it to the inverse of it? And I wonder if it would be constantly swapping between 2 rigs. How would you swap between the 2 rigs? And Paul's asking, does the seed make a difference if you have different amount of clone objects? The seed doesn't mean anything when you're in iterate mode. And it's completely random once you're in random mode. It'll change everything every time. The count doesn't have any effect on it. Now, you can't wait. I guess you could do. Actually, I just thought of a way. I think I have a way. Okay, let's try and get a slinky thing going here. So I'm going to make a cylinder. And let's go ahead and NB. An interesting thing here in R21 is that the caps are welded and the defaults are different, so keep that in mind. Let's go ahead and do 10 height segments, and let's make it 1,000 tall. And rotation segments is fine. In fact, we can lower that even lower. Let's drop it down to 8. There we go. It's pretty clean. And let's make it a little fatter, 100. There we go. Nice cylinder. Everything's relatively square. And let's go ahead and create our, I want a bunch of subdivisions on here. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to hit UL, or I can hit, what is the shortcut? UM? Yeah, UM is path selection. I'm going to just drag a path right there. So you see I've selected that. I'm going to hit Shift-C. I'm going to type in the word edge, and I'm going to find edge to spline. And I just converted that edge to a spline. And I'm going to select all the points of that spline. I'm going to set them to 0, 0. So they're actually traveling right down the middle there. And let's hide our cylinder so we can see what we're doing. And I'm going to go to character tag and let's see, convert spline to joints. So now look, I've automatically created a series of maybe 10, maybe 9, possibly 11. Yeah, 11 joints traveling from one side all the way up. So that works well. And now I'm going to go ahead and we can bind those together. I think is a good next step. I'm going to select all the joints and the cylinder, and let's go ahead to character bind, but we should click on a little pop-out menu here, and you can see that there's 2 new types of auto binding here. So you got our heat map and volumetric are new ones, and then just straight up distance. Honestly, distance is probably going to work really well for what we have right now, but let's hit that and make sure that it's looking good. Let's see, what's the best way to see it? I'm going to select the vertex weight, double click, and you see, okay, yeah, we do have this nice rainbow. That's working pretty well. In addition, I think the binding allows you to do smoothing, but I'm going to go to character, and I'm going to go not to the weight tool, but to the manager, weight manager, and we can now set the setting to smooth. I'm going to say apply all, and you can see it's actually blurring these together, and it's going to give us a smoother bend. So now we've done that, I think that's smooth enough for our purposes here. I'm going to save this right away because it's really easy to mess up your rig at this kind of point, and then you just kind of lose it. So I'm going to save it. Rig slinky. And honestly, this is as good as rigging a slinky because we could just use this. I'll talk about that later. Okay, so we got all of these joints, and what I want to do is, well, right now I think if we just grab model mode, go to R for rotate, we can spin this thing. You can see it's going to bend. It's going to bend pretty well. You can see it's got a little bulgy stuff going there, but that's just because it's sharp. I'm not going to worry about that right now. The way we weight it could affect that, and we can have things scale in particular ways, but I think this is working. So now let's go ahead to our joint chain here. I'm going to right click. I'm going to go to rigging tags, it's called now in R21. This is exactly the same in 20, of course. And let's create an IK spline. So on the IK spline, I have to tell it where's it going to end, and it's going to end on this joint. And what's the spline? Well, this is the spline. And okay, definitely saw something mess up. I think maybe it's because we're aligning on Z and it's supposed to be aligning on Y. There we go. And then, now actually, this is interesting. We're aligning it to the cylinder spline, but the cylinder spline has 11 points on it. And that's too many points. I don't want that many points. Honestly, I think I just want 2 points. So I'm going to make a copy of the spline, and I'm just going to call it spline 2 points. Simple enough. And let's go ahead and I'm going to go to point mode, select the spline, select all, UK for shrink, UI for invert. Actually, you know what? I think they might change something. UK, UI. Yeah, I don't actually trust that right now. So I'm going to just select my 2 points on the end and then UI for invert and hit delete. So now I should have, if I scoot it out, you can see I have a spline with just a point on the top and the bottom. That's fine. So I'm actually going to tell our spline IK that is our spline. Boop. You see nothing actually changed, which is fine. Now I want to make sure that the spline is a soft spline. And now inside of our spline IK tag, I can go into handles. I'm going to add 2 handles because we now have 2 points. And based on those points, I'm going to create those, and I'm going to create an object, it created 2 nulls. And you now see that 1 null is at the top, 1 null is at the bottom. And hopefully, if this is working, I should be able to grab this null and scoot off the side, and it's going to automatically move with it, which is excellent. That's exactly what I want to have happen. I'm going to hide this original one because this one's not doing anything. So now we've got this control. And I always like putting these into a spline. So I can hold down Alt and create a circle spline, hold down Alt, create a circle spline. Now we just have these very clear controls here. And even on top of that, I can hit Alt G on the circles. So what's cool about this is now I could grab this circle spline, and I can move it, and it's going to move that around. But I can always just type in Shift C PSR. And then reset PSR. But in R21, you can see that they added the reset PSR button right in the top of the interface. So I can click that and reset, and it's always going to go back to the original position. All right, cool. So now we need to make it so that our spline, right now it's a Bezier spline. It's got subdivisions. I think that's all good. But we have to go into our IK spline, and I have to give it some depth. I want to give these some curvy handles. I'm going to put them both to 100. And let's see what we got here. Hopefully, yeah, okay, that seems to be working. So what you can see now, it's weird, it's pointing upward there. Let me make sure. Yep. Does that just go both directions? That's representing, or does it have to go? Yeah, that's weird. I don't know why that line shoots up. That's bizarre to me, unless the spline's going up. That doesn't make sense either. But in any case, I'm going to tell my shape here. I want the shape to, right now it's fitting to the spline, but I'm going to tell it to be equal to the spline. There we go. So now it's going to stretch to the full length of our spline. That is working quite nicely. And now we have 2 circles that we can go and animate. And I can grab this and spin this around. And there we go. Now we have the basics of a slinky that we can control. So I can move this around, and if we grab these controls, I could increase our handle. Now typically I would grab these curves and then put these controls, tie these controls into maybe an Espresso user data on the circle spline, so I could move those. But now you can see I can move this pretty smoothly, and now I could just animate these however I want to and get our little slinky motion going. I'm just going to scale, it's going to be matching. There are a lot of little additional details that we could get into. You know, like for one, you can see it doesn't lay quite flat on the ground, and that's because there is a little bit of curve even at the beginning. So I'd have to compensate by rotating a little further if we're going to leave it in the most basic rig. When it gets to these kind of rigging questions, though, I could literally spend the next 2 hours just improving this little slinky rig. Not least of all being things like how this is scaling our mesh. You can see how it's pinching on these corners based on the way the weights are done. So maybe we shouldn't have smoothed that out the way we did. Maybe we want to smooth it more than we did. We can go into our skin tag, and you can see that we've got that it can scale based on the volume, which is pretty fun. So if I grab this volume, change it to I'm going to change it to transform the object based on the volume scale. And let's see if this works. If I stretch it, no, it's kind of the opposite. What are we doing wrong here? Uniform scale. Let's do uniform scale. I'm not sure which one it is, to tell you the truth. One of these, joints, type, blended, object, boom, volume scale. Maybe that. I'm just guessing combinations there. Yeah, there we go. That's the correct combination. So by putting this on transform the bone based on the length of volume scale, what's happening is this is constantly maintaining a volume. So as I stretch it, you can see it's actually getting skinnier. And if I squish it, it's going to get fatter. So it's maintaining volume, which is pretty cool too. So, yep, that should be working pretty well. And we'd have to affect the curvature if we want to change it. But that pretty much does that. And the last thing I wanted to mention is let's go ahead and grab the two circles. I can hit Shift C, or actually I can just click the button, reset PSR, and you see, boom, instantly back to the original position, which is why I love doing that. If we did actually have a slinky of some sort here, we can literally just do a spline wrap here, which seems a little cheap. So I'm actually going to do the fancier version. So I'm going to go ahead and make a helix, and let's spin it upward, and it's going to be a radius of 100, 100, a height of 1,000, radius of 100, not 1,000. And now we would move that down exactly 600, 500. 500 down. And now we can just spiral it as many times as I want. I can add a 0 on there, but I want to run quick, so I'm going to say times 5. Why not? And you see we got a bunch of spirals, so not much of a slinky. But if I make a copy of that helix, let's go ahead and hide our cylinder. I'm going to go ahead and scale this one down to, I don't know, 75, 75. Ooh, that's 75 there. Thank you very much. Let's create a, a loft. That's what I'm talking about. Let's put these two helixes in the loft. And if we give the loft enough points, which I think is going to be about 100, but we can make it any amount. In fact, I'm going to get rid of that, so get rid of subdivision. Now you can see we got this nice spiral twirling around perfectly even. If I want to increase that, I could say 200. Now we get more. Anyway, that's our slinky shape. But now we could take that, and I'm going to, let's just put Alt-G to group it. I'm going to feed that a mesh deformer, which is hiding from me. Right. Oh goodness, where is it? I can. Okay, this one's extra weird. Nope. Did they? Oh, there. I don't know what it is, but I'm always utterly blind to the mesh deformer. I can never find the dang thing. Anyway, I'm gonna put that in the mesh. That's what's going to deform this piece of geometry. What it's based off of is this cylinder, and I'm going to say if any points happen to be sneaking on the outside, just do surface. Initialize, and now it's hiding the original cylinder, which I think we already were. But now, with any luck, if I grab one of our controls here and I move it, there we go, look, now we have our slinky. So now our slinky can do whatever we want and do all these nice little bends, and we can animate it, and we are completely free to control both sides of that. And now keep in mind, I did a 2-point spline, so it was pretty straightforward to set those controls. But that spline could have had 3 points. I could have had this middle point here, and I could have been animating that middle point around, or you could do 4 points, move those around. A lot you could do to add additional control in there. But now we've got a slinky where this can stretch and squish. And, yep, pretty trivial to make some changes to that. If you, let's just say you had more spirals, I can grab our mesh. Let's go twice as many spins on it. It's not going to update visually because we need to click on the mesh deformer and say initialize again, and now you can see, boom, twice as many spirals on it, and now it's updated. And if we already had an animation, then that would just animate and update that as well. So now we've got our nice little slinky rig. Whee! Cool. I like it. Let's go ahead and give it a save. Actually, that just worked well all the way through, so I'm just going to save over the original. And let's move on to some questions. Let's see, any follow-ups on that? JM, yeah, rigging is a great skill. I might be making this tiny thing easy, but it took me a really long time to learn how to do rigging. Like there's a if you learn how the IK tag works and learn how the IK spline tag works, and I think there's one more important one. IK spline, IK straight up IK. Honestly, it's just those two are the big ones, and then learning the constraint tag. That combination, along with some espresso, is almost all that you need to do almost any kind of rigging that you could possibly want to. But it's pretty fun. Um, let's see. Um, Just seeing if there's any follow-up questions specifically on this rig. I thought there was another question I was going to tackle that I liked the look of, but now I can't remember. Somebody else had a good typed question. Make sure to put it in again. Paul, let's see. Do you have any idea how to do a parametric smearing on geometry like you see in 3D prints of Paranorman? A smearing geometry like you see in these 3D prints. Let's see what we got. Whoa! Oh, man. Well, not really. Like we have tricks that we could smear, but well, it depends. You see right here. So what's happening here is they are. What happens with how do you pronounce that studio? It's the name of the first dog in space, like Lakia or Laka. I forget how you pronounce it, but they do really cool stuff. And what they mostly do is they create everything in 3D and then they 3D print things and then they do stop motion doing the 3D printing. Now, doing something like this is like, okay, well, it's a smear. We could do that. But you can see here that they're doing more of a classic Looney Tunes type of smear. We're actually getting a repetition of the face. So it's repeating the face as if there's a bunch of frames being blurred with each other, which is super cool. But to do that kind of smear, it would just turn into, I mean, I guess if you're just doing it for 3D printing, but just straight up modeling something like that could be pretty crazy. I don't have any model presets, unfortunately. Let me think of what's a good way of getting a model quickly. I've got my mouse model. Let me pull that up from my R20 files. R21, auto weight. Is that this? Yeah, sort of. This is when the auto weighting got messed up. Look at this poor mouse. Kill me. But in any case, I just want the mesh. So what I'm going to do is delete that, and now I've just got my nice model here. In fact, let's just close the file. New paste. Okay, so I got my nice little mouse character here, and let's just say we're doing a smear on the face, and yeah, what the heck? Well, we'll leave the ears and everything. So let's delete everything we don't need, which is all of this. UF, delete, or select. Actually, yeah, I'll just delete those. The points automatically get deleted, and I'll have to do a separate lasso selection, and then UW, delete. There we go. So that's all good. And now let's just close the polygon hole. MD closes that, and I think we're all good. So we've got this head. So it would go to, first of all, you'd have a whole animated character face, but I would just really go and start using the mesh builder, the volume stuff, and we would go and put the mouse head into the builder, and I was going to blob it. I'm going to keep it pretty low, but I would then make an instance of our mouse face and feed it in again. And that one, I would scoot over, and you could take it again and scoot it over again. And you could just start repeating it that way, and at least these will all blend and blob together. Having said that, well, I guess that's all fine. We could increase the quality of the mesh if we wanted to, but we can take what's being fed here. Can we just group those with it? Yeah, okay. By grouping it, they're still being fed in. So then we get a little bit more freedom to maybe deform or displace things a little bit more. So one trick that might be neat is I'm going to grab a MoGraph plane effector, and I'm going to put that in here, and I'm going to treat it as a deformer. I'm going to turn it down to a point deformer. You see it's going to kind of explode all crazy upward. But I'm going to say don't push upward, push on, in this case, X, I think. So let's push 100 on X. That's going to look weird as well, but I'm going to set this to absolute, and I'm going to set it based on the effector's direction. Maybe relative. Okay, maybe relative and that. So, okay, now if I increase this, you see everything's getting pushed to the right, which is what I wanted. So everything's getting pushed off to one side. So I'll do even like 200. Now I can go into the fall off and create a linear field. And now based on the fall off of this linear field, things are going to get pulled extra in one direction. So I think I want to invert this linear field to be z minus. So now things are actually compressing in a certain fall off in a certain direction. So if this actually transitions the entire way through, everything is getting kind of squished. But I would think that if we go into remapping, if I had this lined up properly, if we go to remapping, I can turn on our curve. And now based on manipulating the way this curve happens, we could actually visually stretch. I don't want to go too far. I don't want to get to the end. But we can now visually stretch it so like this part of the ear is going to be getting a lot more stretching, and this part's going to get more squishing. So right there, that's something that's potentially kind of cool. And then if you just wanted to start messing things up, then we can go and make a displacer. But that's, let's just get a little more smear on here. This displacer, I'm going to throw in a noise. So we'll put a noise in here. We'll make the noise a lot bigger. 500 perhaps. Maybe not big enough, but we'll find out. Let's go to our height, and I'm going to displace it more. It's going to get crazy quick. Let's also go to our shading and change our noise to be world-based, so that all those should deform differently. It's pretty crazy looking right there. But let's go and deform it, not based on the vertex normal, but the plane. And once again, it's deforming on X. So now let's have it deform a lot. So way crazy. But now we can feed this a plane fall off as well. And now I can drag this around. And by giving it the proper fall off, you can see I can smear one side and transition into the rest. So you start getting this extra smeary look. And now keep in mind, I'm putting the volume builder. This is what it actually looks like. So it's this really big mess. But depending on how far we push that, and in fact, right now it's intensity centered. I'm going to set it to intensity. So now it's going to be stretching more and more and more. Keep in mind the order of operations here. So we have our plane effector calculating now before our displacer. Didn't really seem to make a visual difference, but important to note. And yeah, there we go. So we're stretching that out so we get more of this crazy smear. All that's looking good. And then, of course, this is a messy piece of geometry, but you throw it into a volume builder, and now it doesn't care anymore. So change our sign distance field to like 5 there. We can put a smoothing on top of it. And let's go easy on the smoothing, just a little bit to blend everything together. And then you put that into a volume mesher, and you get your final mesh here. And now there you go. You got perfect mesh ready to throw into a 3D printer, and get that, all these crazy shapes. Depending on how much you smooth it, you probably want to go easy on it. And depending on how much your voxel size is, you're going to get a denser but more accurate mesh. You can see the hairs are coming through better and whatnot. Or smoother, depending on which one you are going for. You can see here that our unsubdivided mouse head is actually showing its individual polygons, which is kind of funny. But we can always put this into a subdivision surface, although I don't want to do that. It's going to go real slow. But yeah, all this will blend and blur. And then this is a perfect volume to 3D print. Although there's probably a couple little floaters here, so even along these lines, I'd probably make it editable. And then we can select any one polygon, UW, and then I can UI, and then delete all these little stragglers, because these will be, these aren't actually connected to it. But a high enough density mesh, and those would have been connected. And yeah, that's the way I would go about doing it. Now, this isn't the best deformation here, and probably you'd want to go and grab, do some additional deformation where you can put a bend deformer on there. Rotate. 90 degrees. Let's see if this fit the parent will work. Sadly, no. Move it up to the mesh. I'm going to keep it simple. I'm just going to add in, let's go like 35 degrees here. So I should bend the entire mesh. So it's like, okay, now you're getting this whole blur. And the idea being is like they spent a whole bunch of time, but like for a single still frame, the mouse is moving really fast. And then so you get this smear frame, this physical geometry smear frame going. And that would look really good in motion to just see for one frame if it was moving really quick. You see a lot of that kind of stuff in like Into the Spider-Verse. Let's go ahead and give this a save. smear frame face. Yeah, that one could be interesting. But yeah, it almost turns into you are doing stop motion in the computer in order to do these extra frames. It'd just be really cool for it to appear. I really love grabbing like Lego Movie and frame by framing because you can see that they do smear frames there, but they'll do them with other Lego bricks, and man, it works really well. Level bevel. Yeah, Lai. That's the name of it, but how do you pronounce that? Laika? Laika? Yeah, Lego Smear's awesome. Ghost Nate is asking about modeling this character thing. IO design or low design. How do I work in R21? It's not on sale. I do because I am on the beta and I am on the developer forum because I make plugins. So I get early access and I'm allowed to, after they announce it, I'm allowed to show you guys. So that's how I have access to it. Oh yeah, at JFG, using a smear brush would also be pretty cool on it. Depends on how much geometry we have, but yeah, painting in a smear on this would have been really cool. You'd want to do it on your low poly version, you know, these very low ones, and I could have painted in some very specific smears. I think would look a lot better than what we end up doing on some of that. So yeah, just something to keep in mind. But yeah, that is very true. Ghost Knight, I will click on your question though. Oh, it's some of this inflatey stuff. I'm blanking on the name, but somebody had kind of developed the inflating technique using cloth, and everybody started doing it and making tutorials based off of it. This is a really cool use of it, where they've now designed an entire character. Let's see, this is from not motion designers because it's from Vinyasa. Oh yeah, look at all these renders. These are gorgeous. That's really cool. So yeah, he seems to have gone. I don't know. That sounds like a male name, but I don't know. It seems to have a theme going, but they made this nice inflated one, which is really neat. I mean, there's a whole character, and it's well designed, and that's what's making it cool. And there are already tutorials out there on doing some of the cloth stuff. But just to do the super duper most basic version, let's go ahead and I'm gonna make a sphere here. I'm gonna give it a lot of subdivisions. Yeah, we'll do something like that. I don't even know how well this will work. I forget if this is the technique, but I'm going to pin in different things here. So let's select that point and just kind of a couple of random loops. So I'm gonna do that loop and about that loop and about that one, about that one, about there, maybe about there, and this one, the bottom won't look as nice. And if we want to, we could potentially do a couple of repeating loops like this. I'll just do that one actually. So we'll just get this one nice seam traveling through it. I don't know if this will work. I don't tinker with it too much, but let's add in a simulation cloth. I'm going to go to dresser and fix the currently selected points. I'm going to go to forces and turn off gravity. And then if we hit play, it should run pretty quick and nothing's going to happen. But if we go to tag, there's a setting called size. And if we animate the size, I'm going to go from 0 and over the course of 45 frames, let's increase it to, I don't know, 155. Let's see, hit play. Then it's going to inflate, and now you can see it's got all this extra space and it starts bunching up, which looks pretty nice. If we put this into a subdivision surface, it's going to smooth it out, and you get some pretty nice looking things there. And lastly, I guess if we go simulate forces attractor, and I'm going to set the attractor to be very slow, very strong, and backwards. So that should be pushing outward. So this is forcing everything out. And now you kind of get this like little inflation where it's all being forced. Now I'm inflating this a lot, which is probably way too much. So if we just grab this and let's go, I don't know, 125 instead, about half the amount. Let's go chill that out. You get some maybe a little bit better wrinkles going on. It's a little uniform for my taste, but you pretty much get the seams I think there's some additional techniques there, but that's the basics of it, where you just kind of put a seam there and you let it inflate itself. Um, Phil, I'm not sure what you mean there. I'm going to. Yeah, yeah. iDesign definitely made a tutorial based off of it. And the original guy who I think was doing the techniques, I'm blanking on his name, but he had the technique and he was kind of showing everybody originally. So I'd love to give him a shout out, but I can't remember. Mm-mm-mm-mm. Oh, Gelano. Is there a way to simulate chocolate drops over ice cream? Uh, okay, this is an insanely specific question. I should have saved this too. Store to inflate. I think I typed that right. Inflate. No, it seems fine. Is there a way to simulate chocolate drops over an ice cream structure as a soft body integration between both, where the drops stop and slowly squeeze over the ice cream surface, but using fields? I am trying to wrap my brain around that. Simulate chocolate drop. So it's like, okay, a drop drips onto, I'm assuming just like an ice cream swirl kind of thing, as a soft body integration between both. So are you? So it sounds sort of like. Sounds sort of like you're saying that you'd want little. I'm more picturing it like, well, you want something dripping, but you also want it to affect the surface. So it's kind of like the ice cream affects the drops, but the drops also affect the ice cream, is what I'm taking away from the question. It's a tricky one. You could do. And then you're specifically saying using fields. I'm not sure if fields is really a variable here. Let me just think without. I'm not going to restrict myself to fields as I'm thinking about it. You would need like Cinema 4D Dynamics cannot handle a changing point count, so you can't do that. So you'd have to have kind of everything existing or something that's rigid body colliding. I think you'd want to go rigid body colliding with the surface. I mean, potentially you could do soft body. And I get confused when you say slowly squeeze over the ice cream surface. Slowly squeeze over the ice cream surface. Because you have the drop, you have one thing affect the other thing. And you could treat it like drops by using some rigid, you could do a soft body, but quicker with rigid body, and then blobbing them together using volumes. And then they would affect each other. The fields, the new field volumes don't affect splines, and I want to use a spline here. Possibly meaning freeze instead of squeeze. But yeah, F5, I'm there with you, but that seems in contradiction the way it's described, because it seems like they wanted the chocolate to affect the surface, but if you're just melting the chocolate on top of the surface, a bunch of maybe they were prescribing instead of just describing what they wanted. Because if you just want melted ice cream, that's pretty straightforward. Starts to squeeze slowly. Do you mean squeeze or sleep or squeeze or freeze? Because just generically, let's see, what's a good way of getting that shape? I think it's a cube. If you take a cube and we give it a bunch of subdivisions, and then we taper it, and we fit the parent, and we do a strength of 100, and we're going to get that pinched, and then we put a twist, and we twist that, and we start spinning. Look at that, instant ice cream. Nope, nope, nope. Okay, I need all those. Okay, so there is our, probably twisted too much. There you go, a little bit of ice cream kind of thing. Now, I wonder if you're overcomplicating it a little bit, because my thought is if we make I'm going to put a volume mesher. I guess we want a volume builder first. Volume builder, volume mesher, and let's go down to 5. So now you get your little, here's an ice cream blob. But if we were to copy this entire structure, then we can grab our volume builder, and I'm going to put a open and close dilate, maybe? Yeah, by putting this dilate here, we can expand it to be bigger, and then I can make a, or is that just the shape? I guess we could crop it off in different ways, but A subtract B. I don't want to spend any more time on this than I have to. My thought being, if we feed this into the volume builder as well, and I say subtract, yeah, something like that. So if I were to, yeah, if you're dripping ice cream on, this is the crudest method, but you can see I can drop this down, and if we had a different material on that one, as I pull this down, then boom, we're getting this kind of melty effect, and it just travels down. And we could instantly make this fancier by, if we rotated this cube, here's the simplest version, just by rotating this cube, and I can move it directly down on world space. So now it's going to meet it like a little bit more imperfectly, and then you can get the spread happening in a little bit more of an interesting way. So then that would spread out. It's still not perfect shape. Yeah, I want to do the inverse. My angle wasn't very good on the overall shape. But yeah, you could grab that kind of thing and have it melt down. And if I angled it correctly, we could get top from bottom. It'll just kind of boom, like solidify over it. And you could fake it by, you know, having a drip be part of the same volume and traveling down. Yeah, if I were to just make a cylinder, let's just say that's the chocolate. You put that in here as well. It's going to blob in with the rest of it. And now I would just animate this cube. So it's like, okay, there's our drip. And you could keyframe this going down. And as soon as it gets to about this point, you take this cube and you start animating it to travel downward. And then if I had the cube, I'm going to kill the rotation because that's just making this more difficult. But you could just start pulling this downward, and it's like, boom, the chocolate's going to start melting around it. And a little bit of displacement on this shape would go a long way. Like if I had displacer here so these edges weren't perfectly even, then you could just travel this down and boom, instant chocolatey candy coating on top of it, and you don't really have to overthink it too much. You could do, like right now this shell's just passing through the first one, but you keep on talking about the first shape being affected by the outer one, and really I think that this is just kind of the entire effect as my understanding would be. Blurb, and it's running incredibly quick as well. A little smoothing on there, and you got yourself a chocolate sundae. Let me see if there's any, not a specific, sorry, rundown over the ice cream surface. So yeah, hopefully that kind of covers it. Let's see, some people chatting amongst each other. Let's see. And just for everybody, I'm seeing both the chat from Twitch and from YouTube. They're both combined on my screen. So there's two groups of people who might talk past each other a little bit, but I am seeing both of what you say. Let's see. Nepster's got a question. Johnny's got a question. We got lots of questions today. Thanks everybody for coming in with the questions. Couldn't do it without all the cool questions on top. But let's try Nepster's link. It's opening up in Twitter. Oh, I've seen this before. This is pretty cool. Can we do it with C4D? Yeah, there's no reason you couldn't do this with C4D. In fact, let's see if we can make it parametric. In fact, let's not give away. I don't want to give away the surprise at the end. Excuse me, still got a tickle in my throat. Back to cinema. So we just get a line that's traveling back and forth is the basic idea. So let's see if we can make a rig that does this. I'm going to make a MoGraph spline, and I'm going to tell it to just be a plain old spline, and I'm going to say to start -100, go to end positive. So now we get a straight spline, and I don't need any of these subdivisions, so now there's just 3 points on it. 1 second. Okay, so we've got this. Now let me just take a look at the GIF because I just need to see if it's at constant speed. Seems to kind of travel like a sine wave back and forth, to tell you the truth. So that makes me want to use signal, but I don't even know if that's necessarily true. But signal would make it better, and I don't think signal. Yeah, the rebuild broke it, so I'm gonna actually have to open up this in R20, and we'll do the same thing again. MoGraph, MoSpline, line, -100, and then I'm going to make we'll just do a sphere, that's fine. Set it to 20. Let's make it pop out a little bit better. Let's go ahead and put an align to spline. So align to spline, and my brain's already getting used to all the new placement of the settings in R20. So I gotta be careful with that. I'm gonna make this smaller. Let's go down to 10. Okay, so here's a Cinema 4D align the spline. I want the Mo spline to be the spline we align. And then here's Signal from Grayscale Gorilla. It's a tool that I helped design over there. And this is just, we could keyframe it, but I just want to get a nice sine wave. And I can just change this to sine wave mode. And now I can drive the sine wave of this position. So I'm going to give it a base of 50%. So it's going to be stuck at 50%. But now I'm going to tell a sine wave it can go positive or negative 50%. So now this should hopefully perfectly sine wave bounce back and forth. You could have just keyframed it, but I just wanted that very precise sine wave. Okay, now I do have to bake it. So I'm going to go keyframe and convert it to keyframes because we're going to clone this, and cloners don't like keyframed tags. So now we're going to a cloner, and I think we might need to group this. So I'm going to grab the most spline, hit Alt-G, put the sphere inside there, and then we can put that into the cloner. And now, boom, those are going back and forth. Actually, this is, well, it's pretty cool setup already, but now we need to offset them. And the best way to offset them in time is going to be, I usually do step time. Can you offset time based directly in here? Time, this is a straight up modification of it. Let me just make sure it's working. I'm going to say I want a step effector, and I want the step effector to not affect the scale, but I do want to affect the time. Time. It's all keyframed. Signal's not doing anything, but that's still on a tag, so maybe it doesn't like it. So you know what? Like I'm going to delete that, and we're just going to use Signal to animate it back and forth on Z. So there's no need to align it to the spline. The spline is just a visual line for us now. So now let's clear the keyframes, And I'm going to start it off at the position of 0. And the sine wave is going to tell it to animate 200 units, positive and negative. And now I get the exact same thing, but based on position. And now if I keyframe it, convert to keyframes. Now you can see it's keyframed, you can see all the little dots. Now signal's not doing anything again. And now you can see that our step effector is indeed offsetting it. Okay, cool. So I'm going to set to loop, which means you should keep on going forever. And now you can see that if I were to grab our cloner and add more copies, that they're going to start offsetting in time. So this is just the straight up step effector, which I'm going to set to linear. This is the step effector, and it's the exact same animation. Look, I can even delete signal, and the most spline's not doing anything. So I'll just throw that out there. But I like seeing the spline cloned. So these are just being offset in time based on our cloner, based on the step effector. So this is just saying, hey, offset them this far. So I can change this to any amount I want. We're going to see them bouncing all over the place. So all good there. We just have to set it to whatever kind of offset we want. But in order to get the animation we are seeing, let's go ahead and set this to a radial cloner and get the correct orientation, which I think is this one, a radius of 0. And now we start getting this. And now if we do the proper time offset and the proper count of them, then we're going to start getting some pretty interesting patterns right away. All we have to do is make sure that we are offsetting properly. And I need to look at the reference again to see how they're offset. Is that cutting it in half? Yeah, there's something pretty particular here where it's like that's going, and then it creates the opposite one, which is traveling perfectly opposite it. And that might be the step we're missing here. So if I were to make this just be a radial of 2, is it just 1? Oh, 2. And how do I make it actually loop? Oh yeah, that's a thing. I guess 2. If I set it to 180, then now we're going to see it. And I want this to offset. Right now it's 90 frames, so we'd have to maybe offset by, yeah, that's identical. 90. So half of 45. Is that, yeah, there we go. So now these two are opposite. So that's like step 1, but then it keeps on adding more and subdividing them by more. So if I were to add in 4 of them, but now I feel like it's changed. Our step off, yeah, our step is dividing based on how many there are. So now this would probably go to more like 90 or 45 or half that amount. Cut that in half again. Yeah, it gets real specific. The problem is that our step effector is basing it on the count. Maybe the step effector is a bad way to do it. I'm going to go back to, let me hit undo a few times. I just want these two. All right, instead of using a step effector, let me see if I can get a better effect from the formula. So I don't want to affect scale. I don't want to affect position. I do want to affect time. And we saw that it was 45 divided by 2, was doing a good job. And right now our formula is this crazy one. But I'm just going to say I want this based on the ID. There we go. So based on the ID, it's doing an offset. So I don't know if that'll work, but now if I add in 2 more, yeah, see, then it's just offsets by the same amount again. So it has to be the formula like divided by 2 or something. I mean, that's actually kind of close. So half the amount I make it the clones. Oh, also there's 180, and we probably need 360. But 360 is, oh man, this is trickier than I thought it would be. Every time we double the number, we'd have to change the formula, but I'd also have to make sure that they're twirling around properly. And the problem is that they travel on both sides, so one accounts for 180 degrees. So you can't just copy it. Because if we're only accounting for 180 degrees, well, that's close to the effect. I practically did it just by playing with the multiples. And you see we almost got the sphere rotating around, which is pretty dang close to what they end up with here. But they do get this perfect square rotating around, which we never quite got it perfect. It does, and then as they add more, and it seems like each one is like a halfway point between the other one, so we'd have to keep on doing that math. But as you add more subdivisions, it slowly starts looking like a sphere in the sphere rotating around, which is cool. And that is indeed what we have here, but our math is a little guessworky. It does seem like the sine wave nature of it was pretty important. But who knows, maybe signal sine wave isn't the perfect sine wave. I thought it was mathematically, but I don't know. But yeah, as we add different patterns, it's pretty cool. I mean, you get these really neat mathematical loops and patterns going if you were to subdivide enough times. It's gonna look neat. Wee. Divide by 2 again. Divide by 2 again. Almost something. That's as far as I'm gonna go on that one. There might be more to it, but it's a very precise thing, and I've lost interest in pushing it further than we have there without knowing more about it. Sine circles. What time is it? 3:22. We're kind of whipping through them today. Let's see. Oh yeah, Viking or VFX King. You, I remember that you had said something and I lost it. And you're saying you challenged me to create a dynamic car drivable by WASD. So I don't remember the specific code, but you can't do it in vanilla Cinema because there's nothing that can input a key command. But a single line of Python can do it. Now, I don't remember what that line of Python is, but I have a scene file that I do have that line of code, so we just have to dissect it for a moment. So, if I go and find, give me a second, I have to jump onto, where is it hiding? Dropbox, half res, 7, nope, nothing there. Okay, I'm just going to switch my computer for pinball. No. I don't like the way Windows searches. Search on the Mac is definitely way better. Maybe there's a better app on Windows to search than the vanilla one, but man, is it clunky. Just trying to search pinball challenge, vintage pinball machine. No. Oh, here we go. Pinball, open and closing folder. Open file location. There we go. Okay, so here's a pinball machine I made for half res. And if I open up this file, then you can see that I made this pinball machine for out of Cinema 4D that we play at half res. And the basic idea was supposed to be that if I hit play, sound effects. Let's see, what keys do I need to hold here? Nope. Report. So if I hit left, you can see I get the flipper going. If I hit right, the flipper goes. And if I hit up, I pull back the plunger and I let it go. And this is a fully functioning pinball machine inside of Cinema using the dynamics and so anyway, I should be able to go through here somewhere and find that little bit of code that is controlling it, the line, and we can copy and paste that. Flipper left. That might be all we need. Here we go. So here is the code. There's a sound. Here's to run the sound effect. Man, I'm gonna have to update this too for half res this year. If the GUI state of keyboard import left, they go through x equals add, otherwise subtract. I think this is it. That's the line. Yeah, well, I mean, that might be all we need. So let's copy that. I'm going to open up a new file and let's see if we can get something sort of working. So I'm going to create let's create I want a big dynamic floor. So I'll do that, but visually it doesn't go big, and this is all going to be in the viewport. So let's go ahead and set that down to go 4,000, and let's go 40,000. 40,000, and now let's make a big old plane, and let's go ahead and make it so we can visually see. Actually, I can just hit NB, and now we can see the subdivisions. So look, we got something there. Now let's create a cube, and the floor is actually going to be dynamic. And the cube will be dynamic as well. What I want to put its own tag on there. Rigid body. S to zoom up on the cube. I don't want to see the floor. So let's go ahead and shrink that. Let's go ahead and lengthen this up. We're going to make this as simple as possible. Excuse me. Okay, let's go ahead and create a cylinder. We're going to make our 4 wheels. Nice and big and chunky. Let's not take any chances here, so we'll just go and have nice big fat wheels. So we'll do that. We're going to make that dynamic. Let's call it number 1. Let's go ahead and make the inverse of it. I had this pop up before. I'm not sure what that means. In-game HUD available. I think it's something that the XSplit does. I gotta figure that out. Okay, this is -X. Now we need to connect those. Let me connect those before I go further. So, simulate dynamics connector. Put this connector inside of there. Oh, I should have done this in R21. I could use the reset PSR button. Anyway, now I've got this connector. I hit R for rotate. Let's make sure it's spun in the correct orientation for the wheel. And I want to connect it from the body to the wheel. And that should be all I have to do there. And I can copy this to the other one, 0 that out, and I just want to make sure that this is referring to the second wheel. So now those are wheels. If I play, that should be connected. Cool, working fine. And then I'm going to actually just let me 0 out the position. Okay, and now let's go ahead and copy and paste those, and these will be the front wheels. I should be able to just scoot those forward. Those become the front wheels. Let's make this a little skinnier so they don't intersect. And these are all going to have to be put in a null. That's fine. Mostly fine. Is it fine? They might need to be made children. There might be some specifics here that get funky. If I make those all children, is it okay? Seems to be. That's good. Okay, and now we have to add a motor to our back wheels. We'll make it rear wheel drive. So I'm going to add dynamics motor. Let's go ahead and put it directly in there. I'm going to hit Shift-C, PSR, reset that. So now there's a motor back there. And this motor is going to pretty much have the exact same setup. It is going to be the wheel connected to the body. Now let's copy it over here and 0 that out. And it will be that same new wheel connected to the body. So with any luck, those are going to start turning, and this whole thing's going to start slowly moving forward. Okay, that's fine. Let's put our dynamics tag here. I want to grab all of our dynamics, and I'm going to get rid of bounce and give ourselves lots of friction. All right, and then we're going to grab our motors, and we're going to give ourselves lots of torque. Got to pause it to make these changes. Tons and tons of torque, so these are going to be spinning kind of no matter what. You see lots of power on those spin. Okay, cool. So that's spinning. Let's go ahead and just apply this. I'm going to make a checkerboard material so we can just see them spinning. Boop. Should be all we need to do. Classic. And now we get those wheels spinning. You see them actually spin a little bit, but as the friction takes over, then it's going to then start going. Cool. So that's working fine. The front wheels are just along for the ride. So now if we add a Python tag So now we have to add a scripting Python tag on the body. And here's our code. I'm going to paste in the one line that I still have copied. So we got to figure all this out. Oh, we do have to get these variables. Okay, so here's my thought. If we add a user data, and then this is just going to be, I'm just going to say rot. So this is just rotation. So here's our rotation variable. I set to a real, and it can go anywhere from negative 100 to negative 100 to positive 100. All right, cool. And then that is our primary variable. So I'm going to say, this is saying if it equals add, else subtract. So let's step through this. First time I'm ever doing any Python in a live stream. So here's some live Pythoning. This is saying if the base container input value equals 1, I don't even know what that means. I think this is just if it is acknowledging keyframe left, then I want to take the rotation. So here's, it's getting the body user data 1, which is straight up this rotation. I want to take that rotation, add, let's just put a number up here. So I'm going to say turn rate equals 1. So I'm going to say turn rate equals 1. So if we are inputting key left, I want the user data 1 to add a turn rate. And that's cool. And then, does that make sense? No errors, cool. And now I'm going to say, copy it and paste, and we're pretty much going to do the same thing. I'm going to say if it is key right, which is just it, I'm going to say subtract turn rate. All right, cool. So add turn rate, subtract turn rate. Now we've got a turn rate variable. Oh, do I have to open Python editor, compile, execute? It says it's fine, but why is Python yelling here? Do I have to import the GUI? Let me pop open this other one. By the way, when I'm doing Python, this is almost exclusively what I do is copy and pasting this kind of stuff in again. Like checking code, going back, going back, going back. Okay, import state. Oh, that seems fine. It's saying no errors, but it's not running. Or it's still saying X. So I'm going to go to the console. Let's go to Python. And it's saying, in line 7, the word BC is not defined. I thought I got rid of all the BCs. Oh, it does need a base container of some sort, which is strange. I don't know exactly what that means, but we'll just create a base container. So I just need to do that potentially, because right there it's referring base container, so I needed to make one first. So now if I hit compile and execute, let's clear our console, compile. Body is not defined. Where did I put the user data? It's here. I think, yeah, it's referring to that. I don't know how to get the current object. I'm too fuzzy on it. So I'm going to go back to, I'm going to go user data interface, copy the user data interface, go into the Python tag, paste it on there. So now that same parameter exists here as number 1. So this body 1, I always forget, so I'm going to delete it right away. And now instead of referencing the body, I'm just going to say op, which I think is the current thing that's being operated on. So if I execute on there, oh, op is not defined. Dang it. Live coding. Let's see. Object op. It is. Oh, it's just lowercase. Op equals op get object. I'll do that though. So I copied that line now. We'll go back over here. I'm going to say object equals object, so I think I should be able just to find those other objects, compile. Parameter access failed. Manage user data. It is ID 1. Let me see. User data, pull this in. Python. Can I just say up? That seems to have worked, maybe. It's not giving me an error, and the tag seems to acknowledge. So now the question is, if we hit play, actually, I'm not defining this. I don't even know why this is saying there's no error, because there is an error. This is supposed to be take that variable and it equals the variable plus it. Take that variable equals that one. Compile. Compile, execute. Key left, key right, keyboard inputs. What am I missing? Yeah, it's not acknowledging. And I'm not sure. I'm not entirely sure what I'm missing, because it's not giving me an error, and it's seemingly working. Print left. Print right. If this doesn't work, then I'm going to just kill this one off here. So, as soon as I hit, wait, print right, invalid syntax. What's invalid about that? I'm too fuzzy on my code. I want to do it with keyboard. I mean, VFX King. Like, yeah, you could do this without doing any code, where you just grab an object and you drag it, which is a viable thing. I guess if this is dead ending, which it seems to be, which is too bad, what we can do is something like, I'm going to just grab a, I guess we can make it really goofy. I'm going to make a, let's make a little torus. Let's zero this out on X. Grab our torus, T for scale. I'm going to move it forward and up right there. So there's our steering wheel. And let's make it red. All right. And then let's make an espresso tag. Like I said, I'm already used to the new layout. So espresso. Okay, so what are we going to do? We're going to grab the torus, and we want its, what rotation is that? That is its B rotation. So let's grab its B rotation, and then we're going to grab our wheel, and actually I'm going to put that into a group. I'm going to say Alt-G. I'm going to put that one into a group, Alt-G. So let's just call this number, I'm just going to call it 1 and 2. So I'm going to want that to rotate like that, and that is its H. So let's go ahead and grab 1, and we'll grab 2. And I want our H rotation, and I want our H rotation. And now if I feed our rotation B into those directly, then now we make a camera, we become the camera, we go and put ourselves on the car, make this a child of the car, make the torus a child of the car, and let's make our floor way bigger. Bing, 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 bing. Okay, so let's see. I'm going to, I guess we might just be able to, yeah, okay, so, so you can see I can click and drag and rotate these. It's a little powerful even right now at a glance, and is it, if I turn that way, yeah, it's backwards, so we need definitely a range mapper. So I'm going to create a, let's just search for it. I started doing this more recently, range mapper, feed that in, output, and then we'll tell this to be at negative 0.5. Oh no, yeah, it's half the power and the backwards. So now if I rotate that, then you can see the wheels turn the correct direction and it's turning slower than I do. So based on that, if I just hit play, then our dynamics should go. Oh no, the espresso's not updating while it rotates. Oh, it's being weird. Do you see how it seems to pop into existence? Why is it, maybe, I'm gonna turn on camera dependent. I don't think that'll do it. Dang, it's, oh, when it reset, did these go funky? No. Think about this for a second. When I turn that, that turns. That's all good. If I play and I turn, it's not, those aren't updating, but that is, you can see how this did rotate to the new angle, but the wheel didn't turn to follow it. I'm not sure. I'm going to pull these connectors out. I don't want to make those changes while it's rotated. I thought I zeroed that out. Oh, back to 0. 0. Pull the rotations out. Ah, dang. Yeah, it's the espresso's not, or there's something about the dynamics. You can see that my axis has rotated correctly, but the dynamics is still plowing forward as if that didn't rotate. That's a whole kettle of fish by itself. And I'm trying to think of any way around it. I mean, there's a really, really straightforward dynamics. No, it's not. It's not colliding. Like we're way away. These should be instantly going to rotate and match, but they're not. I've dealt with this kind of stuff before. I'm just not immediately thinking of the solution here. I mean, it should be calculating. It should be updating. And it could be as simple as like we've got the wrong initial calculation. I doubt that, but it could be a thing. Yeah, that's not the one. Or maybe it needs to calculate after the dynamics, or a million other potential things. But like as we spin this, our axis is rotating, but the others are not, and we should see motion from it even if they were colliding. So when I go back to time of 0, it updates, but it's not updating any other time. Nothing should be restricting it. There's not going to be any errors as far as that's concerned. These are just from the code I deleted. Yeah, I'm not sure. It's too bad. Especially because back in like R12 or R13, I went and I made like a flight simulator that had a very similar concept, which is like I could just move a thing back and forth and it could actually rotate and change the direction of the plane. Yeah, and you see it. I mean, you see right here, it's working fine, and we have lots of rotation before it ever collides. So, yeah, not sure. I can have to think about that. It's too bad. That would have been fun. I thought it would work. And I just named that wrong. Not driving car. Bugging me a bit because that should work. I mean, maybe it just doesn't like nulls, but you can't rotate that directly because its rotation is going to be constantly shifting. The last thing I'll try, which I don't think will work, but we can just put that directly on the wheels. Oh, okay. Well, I just put it directly in the wheel, and it seemed to work. So let's see. So I'm directly driving the rotation of the wheel, which is a little dangerous, but let's see if we hit play. And now let's see if the friction is working or if the dynamics aren't updating because we're just spinning. Easy, easy. Yeah, why are we spinning so much? Don't spin. All right, why are we spinning? Let's make everything heavier, especially these back wheels. Mass, custom density, 10 times heavier. Okay, that makes them wheelie, not surprising. I also want to do the same on the front ones. I mean, it seems fine. Turn. Turn. Yeah, these front wheels don't seem to be having any effect. And we are turning and we are spinning. Which are the ones with a motor? Yeah, these are the front ones, although they just keep spinning. So I'm not entirely confident. Interesting. Weird. Weird, weird, weird. Cinemazuka, like, I mean, I would be agreeing in general, but I just don't think that's a variable here. The even if we drove I mean, here we can. The quickest way of testing is I'm gonna let's go ahead and spin everything so that we are actually on the back of the car, and we'll tell the motors to spin the opposite way. And you know what? We'll even slow them down a little bit. And inside of Espresso, this might be backwards now, but I'm just going to directly drive our motor wheels. So there we go. Now we're driving. Now we are steering those wheels. So yeah, we're backwards. But if I turn these wheels, you see how it's not cooperating. So it might be still that kind of calculation order. I mean, if I turn them fully sideways, well, no, see, even that doesn't make sense to me. I don't know. This is just this little part's frustrating me now. So I want to move on to something else. There's something there. I've done similar things, but it just doesn't want to work out on this one. Dang little car. Thanks for linking to the Rocket Lasso Slack crossfader. Let's see. We got 10 minutes left. Let's see if we have any other questions. Lots of people chatting. I'm not sure what is a question for me. Oh, level bevel. Yeah, I do enjoy motors and connections. How did I trigger the sound effects in the pinball? How did I trigger the sound effects in the pinball? I had been doing it. Sounds if this sound cycle flipper sound object true. That seems. I'm using a lot of code here because it runs quicker than Espresso does, and I was really trying to fight the frame rates here. I think it's all Espresso, and I put all the sound effects in like the master game. Oh, here, there's a sound. Okay, check this out. Here is the sound effects of this game. So, um, there is definitely a lot of meticulous work to make this kind of thing happen. So I have code that's essentially what's happening is it's turning on a checkbox, and here's the time. The time starts. Oh man, what a setup! I got to be going and relearning this and playing it again, doing it again. But every one of these is a sound effect. So this is a sound effect, and it's the code is just telling it a particular time to start, and it's taking the current time and it's importing a new time, and then it has to run through it, and then based on that, it gets applied, and then the sound here is this just a sound node? Yeah, so everything is just a sound node. So the way I'm doing it is in Espresso, you can go to General and make a sound node. And in the sound node, you can just feed in like an MP3 or some wave form or some sound effect. And then there's just a play. So if you put in a condition, if you hit a checkbox and says, if this checkbox suddenly becomes true, then that sound effect will play. And so I'm creating those conditions to be met depending on if certain dynamic objects collide. And then it's all feeding into this one master sound system, which is every single individual sound effect, and it's being told like how long it's allowed to play before it can re-loop, because you can't, dynamics might collide, and I don't want the sound happening again and again and again, layering on top. So that's where all of these are. Every time you see this kind of combo of two green ones, that is another sound effect. But certain things seem to be playing. Oh yeah, so but even this one is the 6 different timers with 6 different sound effects that can play depending on as the timers are hit. So yeah, it's really straightforward. It's just taking that concept and copying and pasting it again and again and again and again. Yeah, there's so many crazy things. This system right here is the reset ball. If the ball somehow got stuck somewhere, it starts doing a countdown timer for some length of time. I don't even know what it is. Maybe it's even hard coded, and it starts a timer, and if the ball doesn't move within a certain amount of time, it'll automatically trigger a big reset. So the ball, if it gets stuck somewhere, it'll give you a free ball back again. Like just system after system layered up. There's all these winning conditions in it. It's really fun because there's all these. If you get the ball up here, you can trap the ball into these 3 sections. So you can get the ball trapped in there, or there, and then that's how you trigger a multi-ball. And the way you trigger the multi-ball is to knock down all these blue tabs. So if you hit this blue one, it'll descend. So you get that one, that one, that one, that one, and that one, and then you'll trigger your multi-ball, and all those will release. But in addition to that, you want to light up all 5 of these colors, which you do those by succeeding at going through the ramp. So if you go all the way through, you hit a trigger here, and it'll light up the different ones. And once those are all lit up, then it triggers a section where this Cinema 4D character, the figure, pops up, and then you have to be hitting it with a ball. Let's see if I can get that running. Yeah. How do I make those light up? There's probably like a master game control here. High score, blocker, ragdoll, dummy null, plunger, reset, flipper, controls, shooting and score, no. Lock, elevators, locks. Man, there's a lot of settings here. Ramp lights. Here we go. So yeah, if I just turn this on with any luck, did it go? Well, oh dear. Once all those checkboxes turn on, then this figure's, it's colliding with the floor. I'm not sure what's wrong with it right now, but this figure's supposed to rise up out of the floor. Right now he's colliding really badly. On. Nope, he keeps breaking. It's too bad because that little figure pops up out of the floor and he tilts back and forth, and every time you hit it, you're getting more and more points. It's really cool. I thoroughly enjoy it. But I'm going to be updating it and making it a new version for this year. I got to make new graphics, maybe tweak the ramps around. Same core concept will be there, just make it work a little smoother and whatnot. It's really fun. An episode where it's all about, did you know you could do this with espresso? Philip, it does not have a nudge. Essentially, we didn't have a sensor for that. We only had four. We had four buttons, which was one button for the plunger, one button for left, one button for right, and then one button which was reset. And we didn't have any. We need some sort of sensor inside of the pinball machine that I built, the physical arcade cabinet, that could detect some sort of movement. And because my computer is inside of the machine, like this machine that I'm streaming off of, this is the machine that drives the pinball machine. I don't want people smacking the machine around. So no, there definitely was not one. But all the code and everything is pretty straightforward. Footprint timer. Yeah, even a lot of this stuff. Like all this is just sound effects. This is if you hit the flipper, it's triggering the different sound effects. And even this is, it's so crazy because I found like 4 different flipper sound effects. So this is just cycling through the different sound effects to get triggered so that it's not constantly playing the exact same clicking sound. So yeah, a lot of effort in that kind of thing. Abdo, is that for me? It looks like it is. While we're here though, I did want to show just for fun. If you go to halfres.com, we have our recap video. And sound for the most part here, but you can see the pinball machine in action. There it is. So look, here's this is a big, I built this physical cabinet and this big TV and my computer's inside there, and you hit the buttons and yeah, it drives the entire thing. So you're actually playing this inside of, this is Cinema 4D running live, and you just push buttons and it makes everything else go. And community event it's pretty fun. I like it. We're already pretty much at 4 o'clock, but let me take a look at what you got here from Nav Designs TV. We've got, oh, look at those cute little swirls. Boink, boink, boink. I'm assuming the question is about those stripes that they're leaving on the ground. But yeah, you didn't call out the effect specifically. So I'm not entirely sure that's what you're asking about. That's the part that kind of stands out as something unique here. Yep, that is indeed what you're asking about. If you're doing it in 3D, I mean, I'm trying to think of like some more complicated versions of the rigs that I would do. But honestly, like you probably do something pretty simple. Here's my thought. If we make a floor, and I'm going to make a sphere, and we'll make both of them. Let's go into R21. Why not? R21, come out and play. No, this is R21. Whoopsie. Let's make these both dynamic, rigid bodies. Make that stand out a little bit more. Let's go even more than that. All right, so turn on some SSAO. So we should be able to play, and that's going to fall on the ground. Keep this real simple, so I'm going to just make a turbulence, force turbulence. Give it some strength, give it some speed, and we'll give these some pretty high friction. Oh, it still has high friction. This must be, I'm confused actually. Why did those have the high friction and low bounce? Maybe they set new defaults on them. So this should be being forced to roll around properly. So let's go ahead and maybe make that a little bit stronger. Okay, now I can roll around. Now, what I'm going to do is make a null, and I'm going to tell this null to be constrained. I think it's under rigging tags now. Constraint. I'm going to turn on PSR, and I want it to be matching the PSR of the sphere, but I'm going to turn off the rotation, only keep position, and I'm going to go to constraint, and I'm going to say don't worry about Y. So now I'm going to put this null down at 0. So now it should be matching the X and Z position of that sphere, perfectly matching it, but it's not moving up and down itself. So what that means is I can go ahead and trace this object. Let's go ahead and put a tracer. And I don't know what it is, but suddenly I do successfully remember to put it from end. And then it does that. It is properly tracing there. So now we can get this constant tail chasing it from the ground position. And let's make that a little longer, 55. And honestly, I would just make a, I guess you could do a hair, but I don't see any reason not to just sweep it. So let's just sweep it. I'm going to make a rectangle, make it editable. Select those 2 points, delete them, select the other 2 points, zero out the Y position, pause it, zero out the Y position. Let's not close it. Create a sweep. Sweep tracer, put those in. It's going to be really fat to start out with, but let's see what we get. There we go, nice fat tail there. And this should be kind of chasing that around. And then we apply, oh, and I guess even that, let's move this just a hair above ground level. So I'm going to go actually set that up to 1. So all that is slightly above the ground. And now let's make a gradient. And we'll turn on transparency and put in a gradient and make it a fun color. And we'll fade that out to black maybe? Or is it white? White is transparent. What am I doing? Fades out to white. Is that? Looks like they turned off default. No, it is there. Gradients backwards. And it gets real pinchy there, so let's see if we can do something about that. Oh, gradient should be on V. There we go, nice, and nice. You get that nice gradient going. If you want to, you could probably turn on luminance, and that's going to be a luminant thing. Give it a little bit of color. There you go, it's nice. Now, I don't want these well, how do you stop it from pinching? Like you could round this out or make them not trace so often. But as long as they do that little overlap, you're going to get that. Why does it keep on rendering black? Yeah, you can see we get that little pinch happening. I don't want that to happen. Let me think. Is there any way to stop that from happening? We have less subdivisions, but then you're going to see kind of a pop as they travel. We'd have the sphere here not curve as quickly, but that seems like a poor solution. We can make it additive. I mean, you can make it, what I would like to do is make it like a hair, a material. I don't know if that would work, but if I made a hair material, and we apply that directly to the tracer, then we can get this hairline, and now we can make it real thick. And the question comes in, can we make it align flat with the ground? Because now we get this fatter line. Let's go fatter still. There we go, nice big fat line. Now this is, I think, going to be based on the camera. I'm going to go ahead and give it no shadow, no self-shadowing, but I want no roughness. I thought one of these was self-illumination. Self-shadow, roughness, diffuse. That's fine. Color. Oh, and then the specular can be messing that up. So let's go and turn on transparency. We'll have it fade out along. It's so weird that that pops up a number. Fade out as it goes. Ooh, it faded out entirely. What? Wait a minute. Why would that happen? Didn't it just render a moment ago? I'm going to hit undo a few times. Yeah. So if I turn on specular, it's still there. That's fine. And then if I go to illumination, well, that's fine. I turn on transparency, it disappears. So let's see, set that to 100, invert the knot, still disappeared. All right, transparency, go ahead and be weird. Anyway, what I want to see is if we can stop this from passing through the ground. Arm assignment, flatten. Honestly, I don't think there's a way to do that. Not with hair. And then I don't even know if there's a way to do that with... I don't know if there's a way to do that with Sketch and Tune. Because the material just kind of is the material. If it passes through the floor... we can layer things, but we can't tell it to be flat because it's always generating relative to the screen. Yeah, it's on the ground. If I make that really thick, it's going to half pass through the ground. You can see right there, boom, cutting off half of it. And there's no way to trick it into thinking it's laying flat on the ground. Well, dang it, that's 3 different methods, and all 3 are being a pain in the butt. Like having it just roll around like this is really straightforward, and it's nice and clean. And I mean, there's potential ways we could round it out. We could go ahead and give this intermediate points, uniform. That's way too many, but even something I've been enjoying doing lately is doing something like creating a matrix object and telling the matrix to clone it to an object. The object is the tracer, and now we're going to get these dots going. And then I'm going to make another tracer, and this tracer is going to connect those matrix dots. I'm going to say connect, I don't remember if it's connect all elements or connect all objects. There we go. I might have to offset that, but the point being is like now we're doing these direct connections in between, so they always exist. And then we go to that new tracer object and we set it to something like a B-spline, and we give it some intermediate points, and now those become very smooth, and that tracer is the tracer being traced. And it should make those a lot smoother. Natural. I mean, I would think they make them smoother. Honestly, they seem a little harsher. No, that's smoother, for sure. Now, it's not to say we won't get those overlaps, and you can see, oh, Sketch and Tune's still going. I'm going to have to catch it early. There. Yeah, see, that'll still overlap itself, so that's a little bit of a problem. And then if it just layers on top of itself, that will just automatically happen. You can't have any transparency. Oh, so rounding it just doesn't work. I mean, really what we want is this to... we want it to be able to trace on top of itself. Originally, I was going to do a proximal trace in the ground with a gradient fall off. That would take a long time to render. And it doesn't crop off on those hard edges. Sorry, I'm thinking faster than I can speak. We're using a transparent material, and transparent material is going to fight itself when it overlaps. If you use a hair material, you can have them overlap and acknowledge each other in a particular way, but in a regular material, you can't do that. We could double trace the object and loft between them. I don't think that solves any problems. We could have the line constantly vibrating slowly up and down, so it's never quite on the same level, so this wouldn't be passing through itself. It'd be slightly raising and lowering at any given moment. That would make the problem a little bit safer, but not entirely. If I did the other method, I said it would be rounded. If I fed this as a proximal into the ground, it would be rounded on the edge here, which is definitely not what's happening in the original. Honestly, I'm kind of stumped. Even though it does seem to be rounded at the beginning. And then honestly, maybe that is rounded over there. Kind of doesn't feel like a hard cutoff. Feels a little bit more rounded. So maybe there is some rounding going on. You'd also just be generating a shape that's intersecting with a flat ground. That's dangerous. You get really nice lines, but the calculation would be brutal if we like just fed the line through. How would you get the color traveling along it? That's the question. It's really nice. It's funny. It's such a simple thing, and it's causing us so much trouble because of the way these can bend and pass through each other. I'm curious if we're making it harder on ourselves than it is in reality. Because, okay, well, there you go. You see two of them overlap each other, and one line just straight up goes over the other one. But you can see that none of these lines are doubling back on themselves. So we might be setting ourselves to a higher standard than what we're actually seeing here, because these never do a sharp turn. They're just traveling. If they're just traveling, everything we just did is completely valid. Like if this never stops moving in a particular direction, then this completely works. We just go back to our matrix and make sure that this is per segment, or don't loop. There we go. So now that line is going to travel there, and as long as it doesn't make these sharp turns, then these straight lines are pretty much spot on. We could potentially round it out if it was needed. We can sweep it. Right now we're sweeping with a rectangle. Sweeping with a circle. I wonder if that would be really ugly. If we feed that inside into the rectangle and we lay it flat, you get overlapping geometry, but is it? Yeah, it does mess up. I was just curious. Yeah, Abdo, there's a very good chance he made it in post, but it's such a kind of simple question. It's such a simple concept that's like, oh, we should be able to do that in cinema easy. And now I'm kind of fascinated because it's such a tricky little thing. It's so simple that there's got to be a way. Because another thought I was having was, hey, but that doesn't stop it from twisting. It could still overlap itself. Could still totally overlap itself. We should be able to do that, though. There's got to be a way. An elegant way. Like I said, there's some brute force methods that are coming to mind. But I don't like those brute force methods. Like here's a super here's I want to show you the brute force method just because it's fun. So we got this tracer. I'll continue using it. It's a smoother version too. So if we were to take, we don't need to sweep it. What I would do, this is absurd, is make a volume builder, volume mesher combo, and feed that into the builder. Put that into the mesher. In R20, there is the new spline control, so we can actually control the scale directly from here. And if we make the density 1 and we make the radius big, 50, 75, and we shrink this down something small, so you start getting this big, he'll get all this geometry, but you get this big, fat, rounded tail. So that's fine. And then we do something absurd, like make a plane with one polygon, and we go bigger. And then we do a bool, the old bool, make a boolean. I'm going to say I want the plane, or the plane and the volume mesher in the bool, where those two things intersect. So as absurd as that is, and we make this plane one level up in the air, and now that becomes a I might have really ticked it off. It's hard to tell. Yeah, so you can see now I've got this, and already the bool is causing trouble. I'm going to say create single object, create Phong breaks, hide new edges on by default now. But that seems to be having a little trouble. And the B. I'm going going to go to the volume measure. Let's put adaptive way up. Okay, well, you see I'm lowering the poly count. But yeah, those are messing up. But you can see that now I've got it's not clean because if we hit play, it's going to go really slow. But this is now a perfect flat piece of geometry, except for when it's deciding to pinch. But now that is just laying on the ground, and because that is a volume measure, it can't pass over itself. Even if it does, it's just going to blob into a single shape. So that part of it is kind of cool. But you know, this is an absurd. That's an absurd process to be generating like all of this geometry, like all of that just to get that blob. Like that can't be the best way to do that. Um, and then just for vertex map, does it have to translate onto the object? We gotta make it editable. Um, I was trying to think of how to apply the gradient to it. We could just do a big proximal fall off on there, which honestly might be the best idea. If it turns back on itself, it would morph the color. I was thinking that we might be able to feed this spline onto a vertex map on the overall a big grid, and then translate those colors back onto the object. Completely absurd. A rounded rectangle plus a spline wrap doesn't work because that could also pass over itself. The reason we have to use the volume mesher is if this turns over itself, it just blobs into one continuous mesh. And with what you're proposing, it would, if it passed over itself, it would confuse the bool. So you can't do that. And of course now it's not passing over itself very rapidly, but I thought it was early on. Whee. Yeah, see like that really sharp, yeah, as we do these sharp ones, you see how we're maintaining a really clean shape. If that was any kind of swept shape, it would be getting very confused as it made those turns. So that's where that wouldn't work. I mean, honestly, this is cute. This is surprisingly smooth, and with the exception of those couple of bad frames, which you're going to get with a bool, which is a pain in the butt. It's working quite nicely, you know, but it would be really slow. But still, we're not colorizing this in any way, and because it's a volume, volumes don't have like a UV mesh to map things onto, so we'd have to figure out how to project another material onto it. There's ways to do it, but it's really clunky. It's funny that, I mean, right away I thought of this method, and it's like, oh, that's gonna be weird, but it solves the problem of it overlapping itself because it's getting melted away by the volume builder. Cinemazuka, couldn't I go back to the sweep attempt and just change the way the materials are projected? I mean, if you do a flat projection down, you're going to lose. It might not crinkle on top of itself because it's going to be the same material layered on top of itself, but you'd have to map the fall off back to the object, like your projection. Essentially, what you're saying is if we, I don't even have that set up anymore. I'm going to save this one. Bad trails. There's a bad trail, Ripley. A bad trail. If we go back to our rectangle, what you're saying is if we were to do this, if we change our projection from that to something like a flat projection, and we project our material from the top down, T for scale, scale up. Even with, in theory, even with it like doing this bad overlap here, if I render, that should look okay. You see how it's like smoothly going? And yes, it's true, that is smoothly projecting, but it's not gonna follow the layout. It's not following the trail per se. So this would have to be mapped onto our sphere, like be chasing, this point would have to be like chasing the sphere around and constantly kind of looking backwards. But then when the sphere changes direction, this entire thing would whip around. Nothing is mapping it along the spline if we do that. It's tricky. A camera map that follows a sphere. I don't even know. Thanks, Level Bevel. I think we're wrapping up here anyway. Uh, Pix Rip. That is something I'd been thinking early on, was to do two of them and create the loft. So the idea being it would kind of generate a little tail and point a point there, and that would draw a path and draw a point, put a point here, and we'll trace that path, and then we can loft between them. I was thinking about that, but you still get the same crossover. When it twists, those two lines will pass over each other, and then you get the same problem. So it's a surprisingly challenging little thing. I'm gonna let that one rattle around in my bread. My bread. Let that rattle around in my brain for a little bit and see if I think of any better ways. But I think we're going to wrap today's up. Everybody, make sure you come next week. Next week will be the final episode of season 1, so that would be good. Darren, what's going on, man? Stick texture? Can you stick texture on that? Isn't this is constantly creating completely new geometry all the time? So I don't think there is such a thing as sticking a texture to it, because this tracer is new geometry every time, and Cinema cannot ever figure out sticking it. I am kind of curious about the idea. I don't think it'll work, but let's try it. So if I did project that there, T for scale, so now it's approximately mapping correctly. But if I put a stick texture tag, I don't know where that'd be. That would be material tags, pin material. Oh, they changed it to pin material. Record. Yeah, you see it's just passing right through it. And that's because this tracer object is being considered a brand new object every refresh, so it can't like lock them to UVs because they're new UVs every refresh. It's a tricky one. If anybody thinks of a cool way of doing it, definitely bring it up in the Slack channel, because I would be very curious about how to do it. This is a seemingly simple problem, and Sketch and Tune won't work. Hair doesn't seem to want to work because of the projections. And then the one that's closest to what I'm imagining in my head is that freaking volume mesher builder one, and that is no way to do that for sure. So yeah, it's a interesting, weird question. But anyway, once again, thank you everybody for coming and hanging out, especially for supporting on Patreon. See, I didn't even make that animation, so I don't get to pop that up now. Let's see. Anything else to announce? Nope. If anybody's in Chicago, see you tonight at the meetup. If not, hopefully you're coming to Half Res on September 18th. Go to halfres.com to get your ticket if you haven't already. Otherwise, head on over to rocketlassoslack.com to continue the conversation on Slack, especially if you think of a solution to the problem we just were tinkering around with. Thanks again, everybody. Big shout out to everybody supporting on Patreon. And otherwise, I'll see you guys next week. Bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye.